In the shadowy history of Chicago's underworld, there is one rule that every criminal cop and hustler knew: you do not cross Lorenzo Moretti. As the capo of the North Side, Moretti was a ghost, ruthless, untouchable, and utterly devoid of mercy. His private club. The Obsidian had a turnover rate of 100% for wait staff, because one mistake meant you disappeared. But in the winter of 2019, a desperate girl named Elena Vance didn't just survive the week. She shattered every rule in his book. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the true bloody story of how a waitress brought the devil to his knees. The rain in Chicago doesn't wash the streets clean. It just makes the grime slicker. That's what Elena Vance was thinking as she stood outside the heavy iron-reinforced doors of the Obsidian on a freezing Tuesday night in November. Her thrift store coat was soaked through, clinging to her shivering frame, but the cold was nothing compared to the pit of dread in her stomach. She checked her bank balance on her cracked phone screen. $14,032. Inside her pocket was a crumpled letter from St. Jude's Medical Center. Her mother's chemotherapy had been halted. Payment overdue. $12,000 needed by Friday, or they discharged her. Elena didn't have a choice. She didn't have the luxury of fear. She pushed the buzzer. The door cracked open, revealing a man who looked more like a refrigerator wrapped in a suit than a human being. This was Marcus Thorne, the floor manager of Chicago's most exclusive and dangerous underground lounge. "Name," he grunted. "Eleanor Vance. I'm here for the 9:00 p.m. trial." Marcus looked her up and down, his eyes devoid of sympathy. He saw the frayed hem of her skirt, the water-damaged boots, the desperation in her eyes. "You know who owns this place, girl? Mr. Moretti?" She said, her voice steady, despite the trembling of her hands. "Lorenzo Moretti," Marcus corrected sharply. "And you don't speak his name inside. You don't look at him. You don't breathe in his direction unless he orders you to. We've gone through 5 girls this month. The last one spilled a drop of scotch on the table. She didn't finish her shift. She didn't finish the walk to her car." Elena swallowed hard. "I need this job, sir. I won't make mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes," Marcus muttered, opening the door wide. "Come in. But if you die tonight, don't haunt me. I warned you." The Obsidian was breathtakingly beautiful and terrifyingly quiet. It smelled of expensive leather, aged mahogany, and the metallic tang of fear. The lighting was low amber hues, reflecting off crystal glasses. Men in suits sat in shadowed booths, speaking in hushed tones about shipping containers and union strikes. Elena was thrown into the deep end immediately. Marcus shoved a tray into her hands. "Table 4 needs a refill. Table 7 wants ice. And Table 1... Marcus paused, his face paling slightly. "Table 1 is the boss. He's not here yet. But when he arrives, you become a ghost. You fill the glass, you step back into the shadows. Do you understand?" "Yes," Elena whispered. For 3 hours, Elena was perfect. She moved with the grace of a dancer, silent and efficient. She navigated the treacherous currents of the mobsters, ignoring the lewd comments from the lower-level soldiers at Table 4, dodging the groping hands at the bar. She focused entirely on the math. 1 night equals 200 in tips. 7 nights equals enough to stall the hospital. Then at midnight, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a physical change, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The music lowered. The loud laughter at Table 4 died instantly. The double doors swung open. Lorenzo Moretti walked in. He wasn't what she expected. The police reports and the news clips usually showed blurry photos or sketches. In person, he was devastating. Tall, perhaps 6'3", wearing a suit that cost more than Elena's entire life earnings. His hair was dark, slicked back, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. He didn't walk. He prowled. Flanked by 2 armed guards, he moved to table 1. The VIP booth elevated slightly above the rest of the floor. He sat down, and the entire room seemed to pivot around him. Elena froze near the service station. "Vance!" Marcus hissed in her ear, making her jump. "Table 1. A bottle of the Fortune Dalmore. 2 glasses. Go, now." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She grabbed the tray. She grabbed the crystal glasses. She grabbed the bottle that cost $8,000. She walked toward the lion's den. As she approached, she kept her eyes on the floor, watching the polished tips of Lorenzo's shoes. She set the coaster down, softly, perfectly. She placed the glass. She began to pour the amber liquid, her hand steady through sheer force of will. "You're late with the shipment, Russo," Lorenzo said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth, like velvet, but sharp like a razor. The man across from him, a heavy-set guy named Russo, was sweating profusely. "Enzo, please. The feds were sniffing around the docks. I had to ditch the cargo." "You ditched $2 million of my product because you saw a patrol car?" Lorenzo asked calmly. He picked up the glass Elena had just poured. "I panicked. I can make it back." Lorenzo took a sip. "You can't make back time, Russo. You wasted mine." Elena finished pouring Russo's glass. She was about to step back to vanish as instructed when Russo, shaking with terror, threw his hands up to plead. His hand struck Elena's tray. It happened in slow motion. The heavy silver tray clipped the edge of the crystal bottle on the table. The bottle wobbled. Elena lunged. It was pure reflex. She ignored the rule about invisibility. She ignored the rule about not moving quickly near the boss. She threw her hand out and caught the $8,000 bottle by the neck, just millimeters before it hit the marble tabletop. But in doing so, the momentum splashed a distinct dark amber wave of whiskey over the cuff of Lorenzo Moretti's pristine white shirt. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence descended on the obsidian. Even the bartender stopped shaking a martini. Marcus, watching from the corner, covered his eyes. Lorenzo froze. He slowly lowered his glass. He looked at the stain on his cuff. Then, for the first time, he lifted his eyes. He looked directly at Elena. Elena couldn't breathe. She was holding the bottle, her body bent over the table. She met his gaze. His eyes were terrifying, intelligent, predatory, and currently blazing with a cold fury. "You," Lorenzo said softly. "What is your name?" Elena straightened up, clutching the bottle to her chest. Her mother's face flashed in her mind. The hospital bed. The debt. If she died tonight, who would pay the bills? "Elena," she said. Her voice didn't crack. "Elena." Lorenzo repeated, testing the sound of it. He stood up. He towered over her. "Do you know what happens to people who ruin my suits? Elena." Russo, eager to deflect attention from his own screw-up, jumped in. "Stupid girl. Look what you did to the boss. You should be taken out back and—" "Shut up," Lorenzo said without looking at Russo. Lorenzo stepped closer to Elena. He smelled of sandalwood and gunpowder. He reached out a hand. Elena flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, he took the bottle from her hands and set it on the table. "You have fast hands," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But you're clumsy." "It wasn't my fault," Elena blurted out. The room gasped. Marcus looked like he was about to have a stroke. "You never spoke back." Lorenzo tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me." "He hit the tray," Elena said, pointing a shaking finger at Russo. "He was flailing his arms because he's scared of you. He hit the tray. I caught the bottle. I saved your liquor. The stain, that was collateral damage." Russo turned purple. "You lying little," Lorenzo held up a hand. Silence returned. He looked at Russo. Then he looked at Elena. The air crackled with tension. Lorenzo Moretti wasn't used to being answered. He wasn't used to eye contact. And he certainly wasn't used to a waitress in a cheap skirt telling him the facts of life. A corner of Lorenzo's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was something darker. "Get a towel," Lorenzo ordered her. Elena nodded and rushed to the service station. When she returned with a warm towel, she expected to be fired or shot. Instead, Lorenzo held out his wrist. "Clean it." Elena paused. She had to touch him. She reached out her rough, work-worn hands, brushing against his smooth skin. She dabbed at the whiskey stain on his cuff. She could feel the steady, slow pulse of his blood beneath the skin. He was watching her. She could feel his gaze burning into the top of her head. "You're not afraid of me," Lorenzo observed quietly, so only she could hear. Elena looked up, pausing her cleaning. "I'm terrified of you, Mr. Moretti. But I need this job more than I need to breathe right now." Lorenzo stared at her for a long, agonizing second. Then he pulled his arm back. "Get out of my sight," he said coldly. Elena turned and walked away, her legs feeling like jelly. "And Elena." She stopped. "See you tomorrow night. Don't be late." Elena exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. She had survived. But as she retreated to the kitchen, she didn't see the way Lorenzo Moretti watched her go, ignoring Russo completely. She didn't know that by surviving she hadn't escaped the web. She had just entangled herself in the center of it. The next 3 nights were a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion. Elena expected retaliation, but instead she got something worse attention, not overt attention. Lorenzo didn't speak to her, but every time he was in the club, which was every night, now unusually Elena could feel his eyes on her. When she poured drinks for other tables, when she wiped down the bar, when she walked to the kitchen. He was tracking her, like a wolf watching a deer graze, waiting for the wind to change. The tips were incredible. The other mobsters saw that the boss hadn't killed her for speaking back, and it earned her a strange sort of respect. Or perhaps they were just scared to touch what might be Lorenzo's new toy. By Friday, she had $800 cash in her pocket. It wasn't enough for the $12,000 bill, but it was a start. But Friday night was different. Friday was collection night. The vibe in the Obsidian was sharper, more aggressive. The music was louder to cover conversations. Men came in carrying briefcases and left without them. Around 1:00 a.m., the club was clearing out. Only the inner circle remained. Marcus signaled Elena. "Boss wants a coffee. Black. 2 sugars. Bring it to the back office." Elena froze. "The back office? I thought no staff goes back there." "You do what you're told," Marcus snapped. "He asked for you specifically." Elena prepared the coffee with trembling hands. The back office was where the real business happened. The rumors said the carpet in the back office was red, so the blood wouldn't show. She walked down the long, dimly lit corridor. She reached the heavy oak door and knocked. "Enter!" She pushed the door open. The office was opulent, lined with books and smelling of cigar smoke. Lorenzo was sitting behind a massive desk, but he wasn't alone. There was a man tied to a chair in the center of the room. His face was bruised, his lip split. Elena recognized him. It was a city councilman she'd seen on TV. Eleanor stopped in the doorway, the coffee cup rattling on the saucer. Lorenzo looked up from a file he was reading. He didn't look concerned that she had just walked in on a felony. "Put it on the desk." Elena forced her feet to move. "Don't look at the guy in the chair. Just walk. Put the coffee down. Leave." She walked past the councilman, who whimpered through a gag. She placed the coffee next to Lorenzo's hand. "Thank you," Lorenzo said. He didn't dismiss her immediately. He took a sip of the coffee, his eyes locking onto hers. "Do you know who this is, Elena?" "I don't know anything," she said quickly. "I'm just the waitress." "This is Councilman Miller," Lorenzo said, as if discussing the weather. "He took a very large loan from me to fund his campaign. Now he says he can't rezone the warehouse district for my imports." "Please," the man in the chair muffled. Lorenzo stood up. He walked around the desk, leaning against it, crossing his arms. The muscles in his chest strained against his shirt. "I have a problem, Elena. I need someone to deliver a message to Miller's wife, to let her know that unless the zoning permits are signed by Monday, her husband won't be coming home." Elena felt sick. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my men are thugs," Lorenzo said. "They lack subtlety. If I send Rocco to the wife, she'll call the police immediately. But you—" He looked her up and down. "You look innocent. You look like a concerned citizen. A poor, struggling girl who just heard a rumor." "I'm not a criminal," Elena said, stepping back. "I serve drinks. That's it." Lorenzo pushed off the desk and closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He trapped her against the bookshelf, his hands resting on the shelves on either side of her head. He didn't touch her, but his heat radiated onto her. "We are all criminals, Elena," he whispered. "It's just a matter of price. Marcus tells me you've been picking up extra shifts. You count your tips in the alleyway. You wear shoes that have holes in the soles." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He fanned it out. $100 bills. Thousands of them. $10,000, Lorenzo said. "Just to go to a house in the suburbs, ring the doorbell, hand her a phone so I can speak to her, then leave." Elena stared at the money. It was almost exactly what she needed for her mother. It was blood money. It was dirty. But her mother's doctor had called again that morning. They were going to stop the treatment on Monday. Elena's voice failed her. "Everyone has a price," Lorenzo murmured, leaning down so his lips brushed her ear. "What is yours, little waitress? Your dignity or your survival?" Elena looked at the councilman, then at the money, and finally into Lorenzo's dark, abyss-like eyes. She realized then that this wasn't just a job. It was a test. He was seeing if she could be corrupted. She snatched the envelope from his hand. "I need the address," she said coldly. Lorenzo smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, and it was terrifyingly handsome. "Good girl." He handed her a slip of paper and a burner phone. "You take my car. Rocco will drive you. Do not try to run, Elena. I know where you live. I know about your mother at St. Jude's." Elena's blood ran cold. "If you touch her—" "I don't hurt civilians unless I have to." Lorenzo cut her off. "Do this, and your mother's medical bills are paid for the next 6 months. Cross me, and the hospital loses power." Elena turned and fled the room, clutching the money and the phone. As she sat in the back of the black SUV, driven by the silent enforcer, Rocco Elena, realized she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was an accomplice. She arrived at the Miller residence in an upscale suburb. It was 2:00 a.m. She rang the bell. A woman answered, looking tired and frightened. "Yes." "Mrs. Miller?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. I have a call for you. It's about your husband." She handed the burner phone to the woman. The woman listened for 10 seconds, went pale, and nodded. She handed the phone back to Elena and slammed the door. Job done. When Elena returned to the Obsidian, the councilman was gone. The back office was empty except for Lorenzo, who was pouring himself a drink. "Did she take the call?" he asked without turning around. "Yes," Elena said. She threw the burner phone on his desk. "I'm going home." "You did well," Lorenzo said. He turned and walked toward her. "You have potential, Eleanor. You're smart. You act under pressure. You're desperate. That makes you dangerous." "I'm not dangerous," Elena spat. "I'm trapped. There's a difference." "Is there?" Lorenzo stopped inches from her. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. The touch sent a jolt of electricity down her spine that she hated herself for feeling. "You liked the power, didn't you? Holding that woman's fate in your hand." "No." Elena lied. "Liar," Lorenzo whispered. "Go home to your mother, Elena. But remember, you belong to me now." Elena ran out of the club into the rainy night. She clutched the cash to her chest. She had saved her mother. But as she walked down the dark street, she couldn't shake the feeling of Lorenzo's touch on her skin. She had broken the rules of the underworld and survived, but she knew the game was only just beginning. She thought the night was over. She was wrong. As she unlocked her apartment door, her own phone buzzed. An unknown number. She picked up. "Elena!" A panicked voice. It was Marcus. "Marcus, what is it I just left?" "Don't go back to your apartment," Marcus hissed. "The Irish mob, the O'Haras. They saw you leave the Miller house. They know you're working for Lorenzo. They're coming for you, Elena. You need to run." Elena dropped her keys. She heard heavy footsteps thundering up the stairs of her apartment building. She was trapped, and the only person powerful enough to save her was the devil she had just made a deal with. Elena dropped the keys. The sound jangled loudly in the silent hallway, but it was drowned out by the heavy thud of boots hitting the landing below. Think. Move. She couldn't go into her apartment. It was a dead end. If she locked herself in, they would kick the door down in seconds. She looked up. The access hatch to the roof. She scrambled up the rusty metal ladder, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She shoved the heavy hatch open, rain instantly soaking her face, and hauled herself onto the tar paper roof of the tenement building. She slammed the hatch shut and sat on it, looking around for a fire escape, a jump anything. The roof was slick with Chicago rain. The city lights blurred in the distance, indifferent to her terror. Then the hatch beneath her bucked. Someone was shoving it from below. Elena scrambled back, slipping on the wet surface. The hatch flew open with a screech of rusted metal. A hand, large, pale, and covered in tattoos, gripped the rim. "Here, kitty, kitty," a rough voice sneered. A man climbed out. He was massive, wearing a leather jacket that creaked as he moved. He was followed by a second man, leaner, with a jagged scar running down his cheek. The Irish. The O'Haras. "Nowhere to run, darling," the scarred man said, flicking a switchblade open. The metal caught the dim street lamp light. Lorenzo Moretti sends a waitress to do a soldier's job. Insulting, really. Elena backed away until her heels hit the low parapet of the roof. It was a 4-story drop to the alley. I don't know what you're talking about. I just delivered a phone. And that phone call cost us a very lucrative zoning deal, the big man growled. He lunged. Elena screamed, kicking out. Her boot connected with his shin, but it was like kicking a tree trunk. He grabbed her ankle and yanked. She hit the wet roof hard, the air leaving her lungs. He dragged her toward him, the rough gravel of the roof scraping her skin. We're gonna have a little chat, the man whispered, leaning over her. And then we're gonna send you back to Moretti in pieces. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the knife. Bang! The sound wasn't a gunshot. It was the sound of the metal roof access door slamming open against the tar paper. But from the other side of the roof, the fire escape side, the O'Hara thug froze. A silhouette stood on the edge of the roof, outlined by the city glow. A long black trench coat whipped in the wind. A gun was held loosely at his side. "Gentlemen," a voice called out. It was calm, bored even. "You seem to have mistaken my staff for yours." It was Lorenzo Moretti. "Moretti," the scarred man hissed, stepping back. "You're alone on our turf." Lorenzo stepped forward into the light. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, making him look more beast than man. "I'm never alone. But for you two, I don't need backup." The big man released Elena and pulled a gun from his waistband. He was too slow. Lorenzo raised his weapon with terrifying speed. Pop! Pop! 2 suppressed shots coughed into the rainy night. The big man screamed, clutching his knee, collapsing instantly. The scarred man hesitated, looking between his fallen partner and the barrel of Lorenzo's gun. "Drop it," Lorenzo commanded. The knife clattered to the roof. Lorenzo walked past the men as if they were garbage on the sidewalk. He holstered his gun and reached down to Elena. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold fury. "Get up," he said. Elena took his hand. His grip was iron hard. He pulled her to her feet, steadying her when her knees buckled. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning her face. I think I'm okay," she stammered. "How did you know?" "I told you," Lorenzo said, pulling off his trench coat and draping it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of him. "You belong to me now. I watch what is mine." He turned back to the scarred man, who was trembling. "Tell Liam O'Hara that if he touches another hair on her head, I will burn the entire south side to the ground," Lorenzo said softly. "Run." The man grabbed his wounded partner, and they scrambled for the fire escape. Lorenzo turned to Elena. "We have to go, now." "My stuff," Elena cried, looking toward the hatch. "My mom's medicine list. My clothes." "Forget it," Lorenzo said, guiding her firmly toward the fire escape where he had come up. "Your old life ended the moment you took that envelope, Elena. You're a ghost now." Down in the alley, the black SUV was waiting. Rocco opened the door. Lorenzo shoved her inside and climbed in after her. "Home," Lorenzo said to Rocco. "My apartment," Elena started. "Burned," Lorenzo said flatly. "By morning, the O'Haras will torch it, looking for evidence. You can never go back there." Elena slumped against the leather seat, the adrenaline crashing. She began to shake violently. She was homeless. She was a target for a mob war. And she was sitting next to the most dangerous man in the city. Lorenzo didn't speak. He simply reached into the minibar console, poured a glass of water, and handed it to her. Then he took her hand, the one that was shaking, and held it in his own, resting it on the center console. He didn't let go for the entire drive. Lorenzo's home wasn't a house. It was a fortress in the school. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the Moretti Spire, a building he owned in downtown Chicago. The elevator opened directly into a living room that was larger than the entire floor of Elena's apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a city that looked beautiful from up here, hiding the rot down below. "Rocco, stay downstairs. No one comes up without my biometric clearance," Lorenzo ordered as they stepped out. "Yes, boss." The elevator doors slid shut, leaving them alone in the silence. Elena stood in the middle of the room, dripping water onto the white marble floor. She felt small, dirty, and utterly out of place. Lorenzo walked to a control panel on the wall. The lights dimmed to a warm glow, and the fireplace ignited automatically. He turned to her. He had shed his wet jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing muscular forearms. "The guest suite is down the hall, second door on the left," he said. "There are clothes in the closet. They might be a bit big. They belonged to someone else. Shower. Change. Then come out. We need to talk." Elena didn't argue. She walked down the hall, entering a bathroom that looked like a spa. She stripped off her soaked thrift store clothes and stood under the scalding hot water for 20 minutes, scrubbing the feeling of the O'Hara thug's hands off her skin. She found a silk robe in the closet. It was emerald green and expensive. She wrapped it around herself, tying the belt tight, and stepped back out into the living room. Lorenzo was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had set out a plate of food on the coffee table, simple sandwiches, fruit water. "Eat," he said without turning around. Elena realized she was starving. She sat and ate quickly. Lorenzo watched her reflection in the glass window. "Why?" Elena asked after she finished. Lorenzo turned. "Why what? Why did you come for me? You have hundreds of soldiers. You could have sent Rocco. You came yourself. You risked yourself on that roof." Lorenzo walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her. He looked tired. For the first time, the mask slipped slightly. "Because it was my fault," he admitted. His voice was low. "I involved you. I underestimated Liam O'Hara's surveillance. I don't like cleaning up messes, Elena, but I never let others pay my debts." "So I'm a debt?" Elena asked, a spark of anger returning. "A liability?" "You are a complication," Lorenzo corrected. "But you are also intriguing." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Here is the situation. The O'Haras think you know something valuable. They think you are my new confidant because I sent you to Miller. If I let you go, they will torture you and kill you. If I give you money and a bus ticket, they will find you in a week." Elena's heart sank. "So I'm trapped." "You are protected," Lorenzo said. "You stay here, in the penthouse. Rocco will bring your mother whatever she needs at the hospital. I have already transferred the funds to St. Jude's. She is covered for full treatment for a year." Elena's eyes widened. "A year? That's hundreds of thousands of dollars." "Money is not an issue for me," Lorenzo said dismissively. "Loyalty is. Safety is." "And what do I have to do?" Elena asked suspiciously. "What is the price for this golden cage?" Lorenzo stood up and walked to a grand piano in the corner of the room. He ran a finger along the keys but didn't play. "You work for me," he said, "not as a waitress, as my assistant, my shadow. When I go to galas, you are on my arm. When I have meetings here, you take notes. You maintain the image that I am a legitimate businessman. You want me to be a prop, Elena said. I want you to be a shield. Lorenzo turned his eyes, locking onto hers. People look at you, Elena, and they see innocence. They don't suspect you. You soften my image. And in return, you live like a queen. You save your mother. And you stay alive. It was a deal with the devil. Elena knew that. But looking around at the warmth, the safety, and knowing her mother was taken care of, she had no choice. Okay, she whispered. Good, Lorenzo said. Get some sleep. Tomorrow my tailor arrives at 8 Kindra a.m. If you are to be on my arm, you cannot wear whatever that was you were wearing. Elena stood up to go to her room, but she stopped. Lorenzo. It was the first time she had used his first name. He paused. Thank you, she said, for the roof. Lorenzo looked at her. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a sudden, inexplicable tension. He looked at her lips, then her eyes. For a second, Elena thought he might cross the room and kiss her. The impulse was there. She saw his pupils dilate. But he was a master of control. Good night, Elena, he said curtly. Elena went to her room and locked the door, though she knew a lock wouldn't stop him. She lay in the massive bed, listening to the wind howl outside the glass. The next few days were a whirlwind. Elena was poked, prodded, and measured. Her hair was styled, her nails done. She was transformed from a struggling waitress into a sophisticated woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of Vogue. Lorenzo watched it all with a critical eye, approving dresses, discarding shoes. He was possessive, controlling, and demanding, but he was also strangely gentle. One evening, a week later, they were in his study. Elena was organizing his files, mostly legitimate real estate contracts he used to launder money. Lorenzo was working on his laptop. My mother called today, Elena said, breaking the silence. She said the new doctors are amazing. She asked where I got the money. What did you tell her? Lorenzo asked, not looking up. I told her I got a job as an executive assistant at a logistics firm. Lorenzo smirked. Technically true. She wants to meet my boss, Elena added. Lorenzo stopped typing. He looked up. Does she? I told her you were very busy, Elena said quickly. I don't want her involved in this. Smart, Lorenzo said. He stood up and walked over to her desk. He picked up a stack of papers she had just sorted. You have a good mind for organization, Elena. You found the error in the construction invoice yesterday. That saved me 50 grand. It was simple math. Elena shrugged. Most of my men can't do simple math, Lorenzo murmured. He was standing close to her again. Too close. He smelled of whiskey and expensive cologne. We have a dinner tomorrow night, Lorenzo said abruptly. The mayor's charity ball. It will be your first public appearance with me. The O'Haras will be there. The Russos. Everyone. Is it safe? Elena asked, her pulse quickening. With me? Yes. Lorenzo reached out and touched the necklace she was wearing, a diamond pendant he had given her that morning, to complete the look. His knuckles grazed her collarbone. You need to be convincing, Elena, he said, his voice dropping to a rasp. They need to believe you are mine. Not just an employee, but mine. How do I do that? Elena breathed, unable to look away from his intense gaze. Like this. Lorenzo leaned in. He didn't kiss her lips. He kissed the sensitive spot just below her ear. Elena gasped, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. His lips were hot, demanding. He lingered there for a moment, inhaling her scent. Don't flinch, he whispered against her skin. "Tomorrow night when I touch you, you lean into it. You look at me like I am the only man in the world. Can you do that?" Elena turned her head, her face inches from his. "I think I can act." "Be careful, Elena," Lorenzo said, pulling back, his eyes dark with warning. "Don't act too well. You might forget it's a lie, and I might forget to let you go." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Elena trembling. She touched the spot on her neck where he had kissed her. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm. She wasn't afraid of the O'Haras anymore. She was afraid of something far more dangerous. She was falling in love with the monster. The dress Lorenzo had chosen was blood red. It was a floor-length silk gown with a back that plunged dangerously low and a slit that rose high up her thigh. It was a weapon made of fabric. When Elena stepped out of her room, the air in the penthouse seemed to evaporate. Lorenzo was waiting by the elevator, dressed in a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders like a second skin. He adjusted his cufflinks, looked up, and stopped. His hands stilled. For a long, silent moment, the Ruthless Mafia Don was gone, replaced by a man struck dumb by beauty. "Is it too much?" Elena asked, her voice wavering. Lorenzo walked toward her slowly, his eyes darkening with a possessive heat. He didn't stop until he was toe-to-toe with her. He reached out his knuckles, grazing the bare skin of her arm. "It is exactly enough," he murmured. "Tonight you are not Elena the waitress. You are the Queen of Chicago. Lift your chin." He placed a hand under her chin, tilting her face up. "Do not look down. Not once. You are with me." The mayor's charity ball was held at the Grand Hall, a cavern of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. As they entered the room, fell silent. It was the same silence from the club, but magnified. Hundreds of eyes, politicians, judges, rival mobsters fixed on them. Lorenzo placed a possessive hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. He introduced her simply as Elena, offering no last name, no explanation. Let them wonder. "Moretti," a voice boomed. A bald man with a thick neck approached. It was the police commissioner. "Bold of you to show your face, Lorenzo, after the noise in the warehouse district last night. I have no idea what you mean, Commissioner." Lorenzo smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "I'm just a legitimate businessman, enjoying the arts. Have you met Elena?" The commissioner looked at Elena, his eyes narrowing. "New associate, something like that," Lorenzo said. As the night wore on, Elena played her part perfectly. She laughed at the right jokes, sipped champagne she didn't drink, and leaned into Lorenzo whenever he touched her. And he touched her constantly, a hand on her waist, a brush of his fingers against her neck. It was a performance, but the heat radiating from him was confusingly real. Then the music changed. A slow waltz. "Dance with me," Lorenzo commanded, taking her hand before she could refuse. He swept her onto the floor. He was a surprisingly graceful dancer, leading her with firm, confident movements. Elena felt breathless, spinning in his arms. For a moment, she forgot the danger. She forgot the contract. She just saw the man who had saved her on the roof. "You're trembling," Lorenzo whispered, pulling her closer so her chest pressed against his. "It's the adrenaline," she lied. "Is it?" His gaze dropped to her lips. Suddenly, a tap on Lorenzo's shoulder broke the spell. "Mind if I cut in?" Lorenzo stopped. His body went rigid, instantly transforming from lover to killer. Elena turned to see a man with cold, pale blue eyes and a cruel smile. He was dressed in an impeccably white suit. Liam O'Hara. Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a glacial temperature. Lorenzo. Liam nodded. Come now, don't be greedy. Share the beautiful lady. Lorenzo's grip on Elena's waist tightened to the point of pain. She doesn't dance with trash. It's a charity ball, Lorenzo. Liam smiled, but his eyes were dead. Make a scene, and the commissioner arrests us both. Let me have one dance, unless you're afraid of what I might tell her. Lorenzo looked ready to snap Liam's neck right there on the dance floor. But he looked around. The room was watching. A fight here would destroy his legitimate cover. One song, Lorenzo hissed. If you touch her improperly, I will cut your hands off in the parking lot. Lorenzo stepped back, his eyes never leaving them. Liam O'Hara took Elena's hand. His skin was cold and clammy. He pulled her into a dance, but his movements were jerky, aggressive. So, Liam whispered, you're the little waitress who cost me a zoning permit. I don't know what you mean, Elena said, trying to pull away, but his grip was like a vice. You think he's Prince Charming, don't you? Liam sneered, spinning her around so her back was to Lorenzo. He saved you, paid your mummy's bills, dressed you in silk. He's a better man than you, Elena said bravely. Liam laughed a dry, hacking sound. Oh, sweet girl. Do you know why your mother is in debt? Do you know who owns the debt collection agency that froze her assets? Elena froze. What? Viper Financial? Liam whispered in her ear. It's a shell company. It buys medical debt and jacks up the interest rates to illegal levels. It's how they wash their drug money. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. No. Yes, Liam hissed. Lorenzo owns Viper Financial. He didn't save your mother, Elena. He's the one who was killing her. He created the problem so he could buy you with the solution. You're not his girlfriend. You're just another asset he acquired. The song ended. Liam let her go, shoving her slightly. Ask him. Ask your hero. Elena stumbled back. Lorenzo was at her side, instantly, his hand on her arm. Elena. What did he say? Elena pulled her arm away, as if his touch burned her. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the expensive suit, the power, the money, and she saw the blood that paid for it all. Take me home, she whispered, her voice shaking with a rage she had never felt before. Elena, take me home. The drive back to the penthouse was suffocating. The silence in the back of the SUV was heavy enough to crush bones. Rocco drove fast, sensing the tension. Lorenzo stared out the window, his jaw clenched. Eleanor sat as far away from him as possible, staring at the partition. Say it, Lorenzo said, finally not turning his head. Whatever poison O'Hara dripped in your ear, say it. Elena turned on him, her eyes blazing. Viper Financial. Lorenzo stiffened. He slowly turned to face her. The streetlights flickered across his face, casting him in shadow and light. Do you own it? Elena demanded. I own many companies, Lorenzo said carefully. Do you own it? Yes, Lorenzo admitted. That company bought my mother's debt 6 months ago, Elena said, her voice cracking. They tripled the interest. They garnered her wages. They are the reason I was working at that club. They are the reason I couldn't pay the hospital. She lunged at him, hitting his chest with her fists. You did this. You ruined us. And then you pretend to be the savior. You bought me with your own blood money. Lorenzo caught her wrists. He didn't hurt her, but he held her firm. Elena, listen to me. I own the company, yes? But I don't manage the individual accounts. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know it was your mother until I ran the background check after you broke the bottle. But you knew afterward, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. You knew when you gave me that envelope. You let me believe you were generous. I fixed it, Lorenzo roared back, losing his composure for the first time. I wiped the debt, I paid the bills. Does it matter how we got here, if the result is that she lives? It matters to me, Elena cried. It makes everything a lie. You're a monster, Lorenzo. Liam was right. The words hit him like a bullet. Lorenzo released her wrists and sat back, his face closing off. The cold mask returned. Fine. If I am a monster, then so be it. But monsters protect what is theirs. I am not yours. We'll see, Lorenzo muttered. Suddenly the SUV swerved violently. Screech! Elena was thrown against the door. A deafening boom shook the vehicle. The bulletproof glass on Elena's side spiderwebbed but didn't shatter. Ambush! Rocco yelled from the front. Hold on! Another explosion. This time the rear tire was blown out. The heavy SUV spun out of control on the wet highway, slamming into the concrete divider with a bone-jarring crash. Smoke filled the cabin. Elena was dazed, her ears ringing. Elena, Lorenzo's voice. He was shaking her. Blood was running down his temple. Elena, move! We have to move! He kicked the door open. The sound of automatic gunfire erupted outside. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Bullets pinged off the armored chassis. Lorenzo dragged her out of the wreckage. The rain was pouring down, mixing with the smoke and steam. Rocco! Lorenzo yelled. Rocco was slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving. He was gone. Damn it! Lorenzo cursed. He grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her behind the concrete barrier. 3 black sedans had blocked the highway. Men with masks and assault rifles were advancing. The O'Haras. They hadn't waited for a polite war. They had come to execute them on the I-90. Here. Lorenzo shoved a pistol into Elena's hand. It was heavy, warm, and terrifying. Do you know how to use this? No. Elena sobbed. Point and pull. Only if they get close, Lorenzo said. He pulled a submachine gun from under his tuxedo jacket. He had been armed the whole time at the ball. Stay down. Stay behind me. Lorenzo popped up over the barrier. He fired in short, controlled bursts. Pop, pop, pop. 2 of the approaching men dropped. The others scrambled for cover behind their cars. We can't stay here, Lorenzo gritted out, reloading with practiced speed. They'll flank us. Lorenzo, you're bleeding, Elena gasped. The blood from his head wound was soaking his white collar. I've had worse, he said. He looked at her, his eyes intense. Elena, I need you to trust me. I know you hate me right now. I know I'm the villain in your story. But if you want to see your mother again, you have to do exactly what I say. Run when I say run. Elena looked at the gun in her hand, then at the men closing in, and finally at Lorenzo. He was shielding her with his body. He was a monster, yes, but he was the only thing standing between her and death. Tell me what to do, she whispered. On 3, Lorenzo said. We run for the service exit. It's 50 yards. I'll cover you. 1. Bullets chipped the concrete inches from their heads. 2. Lorenzo looked at her one last time. If I don't make it, go to the police. Tell them everything. 3, go. Elena scrambled up and sprinted. Her heels broke, so she kicked them off, running barefoot on the wet asphalt. Behind her, The roar of Lorenzo's gun was deafening. She heard men shouting, tires screeching. She reached the metal service door and yanked it open. She turned back. Lorenzo was running toward her, firing backward, but there were too many of them. A spray of bullets hit the pavement around him. One struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell. "No!" Elena screamed. She didn't think. She raised the heavy pistol he had given her. She pointed it at the shadow approaching Lorenzo and pulled the trigger. The gun kicked like a mule, hurting her wrist. She missed, but the shot forced the gunman to duck. It bought Lorenzo a second. He scrambled up, clutching his shoulder, and threw himself through the door, tackling Elena as he fell. He kicked the door shut and shot the lock, fusing the metal. They were in a dark maintenance tunnel. Silence fell except for their ragged breathing. Lorenzo slumped against the wall, sliding down. His tuxedo was ruined, soaked in blood and rain. His face was pale. Elena crawled over to him. Her anger was gone, replaced by pure panic. "Lorenzo, Lorenzo, look at me!" He opened his eyes. They were hazy. He looked at the gun in her hand. A faint, pained smile touched his lips. "You broke the rules again, Waitress," he wheezed. "You saved the boss." "Shut up!" Elena cried, ripping a strip of fabric from her expensive red dress. She pressed it against his bleeding shoulder. "Don't you dare die on me. You owe me. You owe me everything." "I know," Lorenzo whispered, his head lolling back. "I know." Elena checked his pulse. It was fast and thready. They were trapped in a tunnel. The O'Haras were banging on the door, and the King of Chicago was bleeding out in her lap. The war had begun, and Elena was no longer a bystander. She was a soldier. The safe house was a small, dusty cabin on the outskirts of the city, miles away from the neon lights and the gunfire. For 3 days, the world thought Lorenzo Moretti was dead. Inside the cabin, Eleanor Vance learned the most important lesson of her life. Power isn't given. It is taken. She sat by the bed, watching Lorenzo sleep. His fever had broken. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, painful, but not fatal. She had stitched him up herself, her hands steady, her mind clear. The terrified waitress who had walked into the Obsidian a week ago was gone. In her place was a woman who had shot at a hitman to save the man she loved. Lorenzo stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at the wooden ceiling, then at Elena. "You're still here," he rasped. "I thought you would run once the bleeding stopped." "I don't run anymore," Elena said softly. She reached for a glass of water and held it to his lips. Lorenzo drank, then grabbed her wrist. His grip was weaker, but his eyes were as intense as ever. "Why did you save me? After what you know about Viper Financial?" Elena pulled her hand back and reached into her bag. She pulled out the tablet she had taken from the safe house's secure cache. "I accessed your accounts, Lorenzo, while you were sleeping." Lorenzo stiffened. "And I saw the ledger. I saw how you buy the debt," Elena said. She looked him in the eye. "And I saw the transfer you made 3 days before the charity ball. You didn't just pay my mother's bill. You liquidated the entire Chicago division of Viper. You fired the managers who harassed her. You shut down the predatory loans for 200 families." Lorenzo looked away, staring at the wall. It was bad business. Too much heat. "Liar." Elena smiled, a genuine, soft smile. "You did it because you felt guilty. You're not a monster, Lorenzo. You're just a man who forgot what it was like to be human. "And now?" he asked. "Now." Elena stood up, smoothing her dress, a simple, spare set of clothes they found in the cabin. "We have a kingdom to reclaim. Liam O'Hara is sitting in your chair at the Obsidian. He thinks he won." Lorenzo sat up, grimacing as his shoulder pulled. A dark, predatory grin spread across his face. "Then let's go educate him." The rain had stopped by the time they reached the city. It was Saturday night. The Obsidian was packed. Liam O'Hara was celebrating his victory, drinking Moretti's scotch, sitting in Moretti's booth. The music was loud, thumping against the chest. No one noticed the back door opening. No one noticed the shadows moving until the music abruptly cut out. The lights slammed on, blindingly bright. Silence swept the room. Standing on the balcony overlooking the main floor was Lorenzo Moretti. His arm was in a sling, but he looked like a god of war. And standing next to him, holding her head high, was Elena. "Get out of my seat, Liam!" Lorenzo's voice boomed through the silence. Liam O'Hara dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. He scrambled up, reaching for his gun. "You're dead. I killed you." "You missed," Lorenzo said calmly. Suddenly the doors of the club burst open. Dozens of men poured in. But they weren't O'Hara's men. They were Moretti's loyalists, regrouped and hungry for revenge. Liam looked around, realizing he was surrounded. He looked up at the balcony at Elena. You little rat. You set me up." Elena stepped forward to the railing. She looked down at the man who had threatened her, the man who represented everything evil in her world. "I'm not a rat, Liam," she said, her voice clear and ringing through the hall. "I'm the woman who just bought your debt." She held up the tablet. "Viper Financial acquired the O'Hara Syndicate's offshore loans this morning. You're bankrupt, Liam. You can't pay your soldiers. And in this city, if you can't pay—" She didn't need to finish. Liam's own bodyguards stepped away from him. Lorenzo looked at Elena, pride burning in his eyes. He leaned in and whispered, "Checkmate." The guards dragged a screaming Liam out of the club. The room erupted into cheers. The king had returned. Lorenzo turned to Elena. He didn't care about the crowd. He didn't care about the city. He took her face in his good hand. "I told you," he whispered. "You belong to me." Elena smiled, leaning into his touch, finally closing the distance. "No, boss. We belong to each other." She kissed him, and for the first time in the history of the Obsidian, the ruthlessness of the Mafia boss was broken not by a bullet, but by the waitress who stole his heart. And that is the incredible story of Elena and Lorenzo. From a desperate waitress scraping for tips to the queen of the Chicago underworld, Elena proved that sometimes the only way to survive a monster is to tame him. It's a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the city, loyalty and love can change the game, but only if you're brave enough to break the rules. If you enjoyed this twist-filled mafia romance, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done in Elena's position? Would you have saved Lorenzo or taken the money and run? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next dramatic story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. In